What's the most bizarre coincidence you've ever experienced? I was going to a trivia night with my roommate. I invited my high school friend. He invited his college friend who came from the other side of the country. When they saw each other, they exclaimed, "Oh, long time no see." They had arranged that same morning via Facebook to visit an apartment and had just decided to be roommates. When I was in college as a foreigner, I got hit by a car, and a guy was kind enough to pick up my things, call an ambulance, help me call my family. Due to the shock, I couldn't remember it, and I had to take a semester off because I broke my hip in 2 parts. When I returned to school, he was in the same class as me, showed me my dad's contact with his name as proof, and we became friends. Once I was on a date with a girl. We were driving in my car to where we were going. I was telling her a story about a friend of mine who had recently been rear-ended just as we stopped at a red light. While I was telling the story, a car in the lane next to us flew by and rear-ended a stopped car. As I was speaking, I saw it, pointed, and said, "It was just like that thing you just saw there." It took a few seconds for me to realize how strange the coincidence was. My brother used to buy me these technology magazines called Digit every month. It had been almost a decade since he had done that. One day, I randomly thought about that magazine and remembered he used to buy them for me. Several hours later, that same day, he visited our house and gave me a new edition of that magazine. He saw them in a store and remembered how he used to buy them for me, so he bought one. I ended up in the hospital after a car accident on my 18th birthday. I ended up sharing a room with a girl who was in a different car accident also on her 18th birthday. We ended up finding out, or rather our mothers found out, that we were both born in the same hospital at the same time, about 15 minutes apart. We remain good friends. I don't particularly believe in all that zodiac stuff, but it's super weird how similar we are in personality and especially in our sense of humor. When I was starting my freshman year in high school, the first hour the teacher was late, so I struck up a conversation with one of the other kids waiting. It turns out he and I were born on the same day in the same foreign hospital. Instant bond. My dad and his friend, both from Sweden, went on vacation to Las Vegas in the 80s. After a night of partying, they decided to go to a random restaurant, and while they were in the parking lot, they ran into 2 Swedish girls who were also on vacation. Maybe not a big coincidence except for the fact that my dad and that friend went to Las Vegas exactly 10 years later, went to the same restaurant, and ran into the same 2 women in the parking lot again. Edit. No, they weren't prostitutes, haha. This is a bit funny, but about 5 or 6 years ago, my wife and I moved from New York and bought a house in the town where we both grew up. I was at a local store where a blind woman asked me for help finding some things, sorting her money, then calling a taxi for her. I said yes, helped her shop, sorted her money, then called a taxi for her. I felt bad leaving her, so I waited until the taxi arrived and told the driver she wanted to go to the post office. I got home, and my wife asked me why I took so long, so I told her about the blind woman. Later, we were at my parents' house for a barbecue. My wife told my mom that she had raised a good son, then explained about the blind woman. My mom said it was funny because my dad had helped the blind woman earlier in the day too. She got out of a taxi and asked my dad if he minded helping her with the doors of the post office. Turns out, I took her in a taxi from the store, and about 2 miles down the road, my dad helped her. How likely is that? I was at a natural history museum and saw a picture of a thagomizer on a stegosaurus skeleton. I was telling my friends about the story when I looked up the Wikipedia article. The picture in the Wikipedia article was exactly what I was seeing, from the same angle. I started chatting and drinking with a couple of guys while on vacation in Tokyo, who were also visiting. A week later, we arrived in Kyoto, took the subway to our hotel, and as soon as we stepped out of the station and headed to the street, there they were again. I had to get approval for a hard-to-obtain medication through insurance. There was a lot of back and forth, and finally, it got approved. I received an email saying it was approved with my correct first and last name, but the city was wrong. I called the insurance, and they realized they had made a mistake and confused me with someone else due to the similarities. So someone in Brooklyn not only shares my exact name and age but also my same illness. My grandmother had a unique name, and there was someone in the same town with a similar birthday but the same name as her. It was discovered after she picked up a bunch of medications that the pharmacy didn't realize were for 2 different people. This was before HIPAA, so they just found each other and switched everything. My family had a shadow family. They lived a block away from us and had the same address but with a different street name. So our address was 34827 Main Street, and theirs was 34827 Munn Street. That's how we found out about them. The mail was constantly getting mixed up. Our last names shared the same first letter and the same number of letters. They had 2 kids, the same age as my brother and me. Our names shared the same first letter. We got a dog, they got a dog. Same litter, from a town about 250 miles away. The breeder named the dogs after famous people. The first name was for our dog, the last name for their dog. Oh, and the dogs were the only ones of that breed I saw for about 15 years. Possibly the most embarrassing moment of my young life, when I was on vacation at a Butland-style caravan park. I went to find my mom in a crowded arcade to ask for more coins. I thought I saw her, so I ran up to her and gave her a hug, only to discover she was a complete stranger. My real mom was watching from a nearby table and was laughing hysterically at me. The imposter mom took me to the table and ended up chatting with my mom. Then, my younger brothers showed up with 2 random kids and said they had made new friends, and asked, "Can we sit with them for the entertainment tonight?" They were that lady's kids. Both families ended up getting along really well and spent most of the week together, but we didn't really keep in touch. 3 years later, we went to visit my aunt in Greece, where she was living at the time, and on the beach one day, someone came up behind me and gave me a surprise hug. The same family again. We ended up keeping in touch for several years after that.
Our microwave died. I said to my husband, "We need a new microwave." We didn't have much money, so we sighed and resigned ourselves to knowing we were going to be without a microwave for a while until we saved up for a new one. Then the phone rang. Our local grocery store called us to say we had won a contest we didn't even know we had entered, and we won the grand prize, a new microwave. Our family will never forget that. We all looked at each other. Is our house bugged? Edit, to piggyback off my own story, I'll add a story from my friend. Her name is Polly. She had a dog named Jack. Polly was at the lake and heard a guy calling her name. She responded. He said, "Sorry, I wasn't calling you. Polly is my dog's name." She laughed. They introduced themselves. His name was Jack. She was Polly with a dog named Jack. He was Jack with a dog named Polly. They both looked at each other and said, "This will never happen again in our lifetime." So there you go. 2 stories for the price of 1.
On the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, an American veteran was retracing his steps where he had been stationed, in Florence, Italy. I was working as an au pair for a lovely family and was killing time in a cafe when he asked me for directions to Via Maggio. He seemed lost, and we asked where he was headed. He was looking for Via dei Michelozzi. We shook hands, and ultimately, I told him I could guarantee him that his old girlfriend no longer lived in that apartment because I lived there. We were able to locate the woman who had rented the apartment during the war because the building was owned by the family I was working for. Everyone was very excited about this, and we ended up inviting that American veteran to dinner at the apartment. My family has been going to the same beach in Florida since my dad was a kid. When I was in high school, I met a really cute girl on the beach, and we hit it off, but she was staying at a hotel a few buildings north of us and was leaving a few days before us, so we only got to spend time together for about 2 solid days. I made the mistake of not asking for her phone number, in the pre-cell phone era, and when she left I felt like I would never see her again. That was in 1999. In 2010 I was in college in Michigan, and at a party I saw this girl walk by and stopped to talk to one of my roommates. She looked very familiar, so I went over and said hi, and it turned out to be the same girl from the beach all those years ago. We hit it off and spent the next few hours chatting. We eventually dated for just over a year but broke up due to distance. I did a project in college, in Georgia, with a girl who lived with her brother. At the end of the project, I invited everyone who worked on the project to dinner and also invited her brother. We had been invited to dinner several times while we were working on the project. We had a great meal, finished the project, and never spoke to them again. 10 years later, I went to a conference on the opposite side of the country with one of my coworkers. The conference was near where I used to live and work. He said, "Let's have lunch with some of my old friends." So we met up with them at the In-N-Out. One of the friends was the brother of the girl I did the project with. I couldn't even believe it was happening. It felt so surreal. When I was in the early stages of dating my spouse, I took her to my hometown to meet my parents. While we were looking through a family photo album, she pointed to a picture and said, "How do you know this man?" I replied, "That's my uncle," and she said, "No, that's my uncle." Turns out her mother's sister married my mother's brother. I once worked at a pizzeria as a delivery driver. Somehow my wallet was missing a $20 bill after returning. I searched my car and the parking lot several times and couldn't find it. I have no idea what happened to it. I'm usually careful when it comes to things like that. My manager said if I didn't find it by tomorrow or something like that, I would have to take it out of my paycheck. The next day, I walked into work, and as I was walking through the parking lot, there was a $20 bill on the ground, right in the middle of the busy parking lot. I don't know if it was that $20 bill that fell out of my wallet or just $20 that someone else dropped. I walked in and said, "You're not going to believe this, but I found this $20 bill in the parking lot, so here you go." He just laughed and shrugged and said, "Enough." My cousin and I are very close personally, but now we live about 2,000 miles apart from each other, in the United States. We were both traveling in a different state neither of us lived in. I was visiting a friend and he was on business. Neither of us knew this. I was walking near the main square in town and this car was driving the wrong way down a one-way street towards the crosswalk I was at. I said to my friend, "Wow, this guy's an idiot," as I waved for him to turn around. Turns out that idiot was my cousin. And well, friends, that was all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, let me know with a thumbs up so that YouTube can share these stories with more people. Remember to hit the bell icon to be the first to know when we upload a new video. See you next time.